A little over 59 years after the January 15, 1966 military coup, its impact on the country has remained profound. Initially aimed at curbing corruption and bad governance, the coup led to ethnic mistrust and instability in the country. In this video, former military president General Ibrahim Babangida, who was a 24-year-old second lieutenant at the time, shares his account of the coup. He refutes the age-old belief that the coup was a plot by one ethnic group to dominate others and also offers insights into the true intentions of the coup. This is another revelation that is expected to douse ethnic tensions in the country. Welcome to this edition of Hispu Media. My name is Gabriel Hadidia, and I encourage you to help us reach 1,000 likes on this video. And please subscribe to Hispu Media if you have not done so already, and remember to on the bell notification so you not have to miss another episode. This video is inspired by Babangida's memoir, A Journey in Service, an autobiography. General Ibrahim Babangida's story of the January 15, 1966 coup started in the early hours of that morning when he was awoken from a deep sleep with loud continuous bang on his door by his Igbo friend, Lieutenant Christopher Ugokwe. Babangida had returned from a night party a few hours earlier and did not want to be disturbed. In his memoir, A Journey in Service, an autobiography, Ibrahim Babangida said, "But when the banging persisted, I grudgingly got out to confront a bewildered Christopher, all dressed up in field uniform, screaming at me, 'Ibrahim, get up, we have to go.' 'Go where at this time?' I queried in reply. Still breathless, Christopher continued almost incoherently, 'Didn't you hear that there has been a coup and we have been told to report to the squadron to see our boss?' Our boss, of course, was Maj Hassan Katsina. IBB quickly changed into uniform gear and the two headed out to the squadron. He continued, as we drove past Nasarawa, which housed the minister's quarters and the official residence of the Sardauna of Sokoto and Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Ahmadu Bello, we noticed that the Sardauna's house was on fire. Ugokwe was sure that the troops had bombed the residence. Shortly thereafter, they arrived at the squadron headquarters. Maj Hassan Katsina was already waiting to address the troops. Babangida had this to say. Very somberly, Maj Hassan addressed us in his office and told us what he knew then. He told us that his friend and cosmate at Sandhurst, Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu, had led a coup d'etat and that Nzeogwu had confronted him earlier in the day to make up his mind to join the coup or face the consequences of not doing so. Hassan said his agreement to play along with Nzeogwu saved his life. Major Hassan then instructed us to ensure everybody in the squadron stayed inside. As a young 24-year-old second lieutenant, Ibrahim Babangida was lost for words as everything was strange to him. All he ever knew about military coups was read on the pages of books. Later that morning, acting presumably as the leader of the Supreme Council of the Revolution of the Nigerian Armed Forces, Major Kaduna Nzeogwu addressed all officers in Kaduna at the Brigade headquarters. According to Ibrahim Babangida, Nzeogwu referred to them as comrades. He informed them that the military had taken over the government of Nigeria and that he had secured northern Nigeria in the name of the Supreme Council of the Revolution. He then appealed for cooperation and understanding from all the officers present. At a subsequent press conference, Nzeogwu later described the operation as a necessary service to our country to rid it of all filth and corruption. It was much later in the day that the gory details of what had just happened, not just in Kaduna but across all parts of the country, started to emerge. In Kaduna, the Premier, Sir Ahmadu Bello, his senior wife Hafsatu, his senior assistant security secretary Malam Ahmed Ben Musa, Ahmed Pategi, a government driver, and the head of his bodyguards Zarumi had all been murdered before dawn. Also in Kaduna, the commander of the 1st Brigade of the Nigerian Army, Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun, and his pregnant wife Latifa, whom every senior officer jocularly referred to as Susinos were gunned down in their bedroom. Not far away from their residence, a deputy commander of the Nigerian Defense Academy, Colonel Rab Sodeinde, was also murdered. Outside Kaduna, the story was also the same in Ibadan and Lagos. In Ibadan, the deputy premier, Chief Remi Fani-Kayode, was arrested, detained, but was later released. Clearly, the premier, Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola, was not so lucky as he tried to put up a fight. In Lagos, the story was just as horrific. The Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, and Finance Minister Chief Festus Okotiebo were arrested in their homes and later murdered. Apart from that, much of the leadership of the Nigerian army in Lagos was wiped out by the plotters. The adjutant of the army, Lieutenant Colonel James Yakubu Pam, was the first to be picked up in the presence of his wife, Elizabeth. He never came back alive. Then came the turn of the acting chief of staff at Army Headquarters, Colonel Kaur Mohammed, who was also assassinated. Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagima, the then commander of the 4th Battalion Ibadan, was not spared either. He was gunned down at his Federal Palace Hotel room in Lagos. For General Ibrahim Babangida, one of the most painful was the killing of Brigadier Zakaria Mai Malari. Following the tragic death of his wife, Mariamu, Mai Malari had just remarried a month before the January coup. He was 36 and was considered one of the finest officers of the Nigerian army. Ibrahim Babangida said, Mai Malari embodied the best of the military in terms of discipline, courage, service, respect, integrity, and enduring leadership skills. As the commander of the Southern Brigade, he had all the fighting forces of the battalions under him, the Field Artillery Corps, the armored and mechanized squads. It was said that Mai Malari could mobilize the entire brigade to fight back in the event of a foreign attack. That was how important his position was at the time. The coup plotters knew that he needed to be eliminated for them to succeed. Brigadier Mai Malari had initially escaped the mutineers when he struck at his residence in the early hours of the morning. His residence was at 11 Thompson Avenue in Ikoyi, Lagos. But from his hiding place in the shrubs around his home, he spotted his chief of staff and brigade major, Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna, driving past, and he came out of hiding, believing he was safe. He was unaware that Major Ifeajuna was one of the plotters. Almost instantly, Mai Malari was gunned down by his chief of staff. According to Ibrahim Babangida, by Monday, January 17, the situation had stabilized somewhat following the arrest and detention of Major Nzeogwu and some of the other coup plotters. And it also became clear that Brigadier General Johnson Thomas Aguiyi-Ironsi had assumed power as head of the federal military government and supreme commander of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It was a terrible time for the Nigerian army, he said. IBB continued, as I have said elsewhere, as a young officer who saw all of these from a distance, probably ethnic sentiments did not drive the original objective of the coup plotters. For instance, the head of the plotters, Major Kaduna Nzeogwu, was only Igbo in name. Born and raised in Kaduna, his immigrant parents were from Ukpanam in today's Delta State, which in 1966 was in the old Midwestern region. Nzeogwu spoke fluent Hausa and was as Hausa as any. He and his original team probably thought, even if naively, that they could turn things around for the better in the country. That said, it was heinously callous for Nzeogwu to have murdered Sir Ahmadu Bello and his wife Hafsatu, because not only were they eminently adored by many, but also because they were said not to have put up a fight. From that moment, the purge was infiltrated by outsiders to its supposed original intention, and it took an unmistakably ethnic coloration, compounded by the fact that there were no related coup activities in the eastern region. Babangida went further. It should, however, be borne in mind that some senior officers of Igbo extraction were also victims of the January coup. For instance, my erstwhile commander at the reconnaissance squadron in Kaduna, Lieutenant Colonel Ato Shinwelu Onegbe, was brutally gunned down by his own brother, Major Chris Anuforo, in the presence of his pregnant wife at his 7-point road residence in Apapa for merely being a threat to the revolution. Onegbe was a disciplined and strict military officer. He was the quartermaster general of the army and was also in charge of ammunition, weapons, equipment, vehicles, and other vital items for the army. For this role, the coup plotters feared that he might not cooperate with them. IBB then clarified, it should also be remembered that some known Igbo officers like Major Adewale Ademoyega, Captain Ganiyo Adeleke, Lieutenant Fola Oyewole, and Olafimehan took part in the failed coup. Another officer of Igbo extraction, Major John Obienu, crushed the coup. For General Ibrahim Babangida, those who argue that the original intention of the coup plotters was anything but ethnic refer to the fact that the initial purpose of the plotters was to release Chief Obafemi Awolowo from prison immediately after the coup and make him the executive provisional president of Nigeria. The fact that these Igbo officers would do this to a man not known to be a great lover of the Igbos may have given the coup a different ethnic coloration. However, just days after the coup, Babangida was sent for a 4-month young officer's course on Saladin armored cars and gunnery at the Royal Armoured Center in Bovington, Dorset, United Kingdom. When he returned to his reconnaissance unit in Kaduna in late April or early May 1966, the tension in the air was palpable. IBB said, the tension in the barracks was so palpable that you could even touch it. It was clear that northern officers were spoiling for a fight to retaliate against the killings of January 15. The tension was compounded by the fact that there was a well-organized campaign to brand us, the so-called northern officers, as cowards for failing to avenge the killings of the Prime Minister, the Sardauna, and other northern officers who lost their lives. Meanwhile, as is always the case in situations of this nature, rumor and conspiracy theories began to flourish. There were rumors that officers of Igbo extraction were planning a second coup to kill more northern officers. Unfortunately, in the absence of an official federal government announcement about the fate of the soldiers killed during the January coup, rumors were rife as to whether they were dead or alive. For instance, Ibrahim Babangida said, there was a story of a riot that broke out at the 2nd Brigade headquarters in Lagos when an attempt was made to remove Brigadier Mai Malari's nameplate because many low-ranking officers believed that Mai Malari was so invulnerable that he could not have died, and that since he was still alive, any attempt to remove his nameplate was a continuation of the plot against northern officers. There was also a rumor of a plan to swap the 1st and the 4th battalions and rotate the military governors of the different regions. These rumors were amplified by stories of some Igbos gloating over the January killings. Contrary to the promise given after the coup was quashed that the coup plotters would be tried, none was ever brought to trial, although some were detained. According to IBB, on the contrary, a few of the coup plotters were promoted. This confirmed the rumors that an Igbo domination of national affairs was in the works. He continued. Meanwhile, the role of disgruntled northern civilian propagandists and politicians picked up more steam. They deployed a combination of incitement and swirling rumors as psychological warfare to get northern soldiers to retaliate for the killings of January 15. Many civilian leaders kept hammering that we were cowards for not avenging the death of our leaders. Finally, Babangida blames what happened next, unfortunately, on some of the decisions of the Central Command in Lagos. For instance, Babangida said, in late May, the General Aguiyi-Ironsi-led federal government was convinced that the best way to unify the country was to issue the Unification Decree No. 34 of 1966, abolishing and replacing the regions with groups of 35 provinces. That decree also unified the civil service. Decree 34 was a significant disadvantage to northern Nigeria considering its inadequacy in human resources. This further fueled the fears of a southern domination of northern Nigeria and subsequently the entire country. Whether these fears of power domination were true or not, it was clear from sequence of events that something was about to give. Unfortunately, military discipline during this period also collapsed. Particularly, non-commissioned officers and COs of northern Nigerian extraction became unmanageable. Many of them refused to take orders from their superiors. And in an army where most of the infantry were northerners, that constituted a real problem. Suddenly, there was a rash mutinies in different army formations in the country. For instance, at the 4th Battalion Ibadan, northern officers refused to take orders from Major M.O. Ezefili, who as second in command at the battalion replaced Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagema. Lagema was murdered in Lagos in the January coup attempt, and even after another northern chief officer, Major Joe Akahan, replaced Ezefili, the northern officers remained restive. Similar incidents played out in other parts of the country. IBB concluded. By now, rumors of an imminent upheaval were so widespread that you knew it was a question of time before we had a disastrous national crisis. And all this culminated in the July counter-coup that began from Abeokuta garrison and spread across the country, leading ultimately to the Nigerian Civil War. We have covered the coup from the perspective of Major General Olufemi Olutoye in the video displayed here. Don't forget to like this video and please subscribe to Hispu Media if you have not done so already. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.